Thanks for staying with News at Prime. Well, it's a Friday as we ease you into the weekend. Then media mogul Basetsana Kumalo has been on a whirlwind tour promoting her autobiography. It's titled Bassie, My Journey of Hope. It details her life's journey, starting from being crowned Miss South Africa in 1994 to becoming a businesswoman and philanthropist, that is. She joins me now in studio to discuss her latest book. Congratulations on this book. I wonder, then, in the past week or so that you've given it out to the world, what the response has been.
It's been a whirlwind of a time, and just to see the response from South Africans who went out to buy the copy and spend their hard-earned money. And I just heard yesterday that our book has made it as the best-selling memoir and best-selling book at exclusive bookstores. So it's very heartwarming that South Africa has, seen and received and embraced the journey of hope.
Sure, congratulations on that. I want us to get a little bit into the book, perhaps without giving too much away to those who still have to go out and buy it, of course. You begin with telling us about your upbringing in Soweto, Kilani, ironically, being brought up in the dusty streets, as it were. And having then to almost move from that, being cast into the public space in a time where South Africa is changing. Why was that such an apex moment for you?
For me, before I even speak about the 1994 era of me being crowned and, of course, where our country was at, I think it was important for me to journey back to give a full contextualization of who I am, who I was raised by, who my forefathers were, and the fact that I come from a generation of entrepreneurs. So then, fast forward, I go into this realm of 1994. New government, new dispensation, new democracy, new leadership. And then I get the privilege to wear the crown in 1994. I couldn't have scripted it better myself, even if I tried. And the zeitgeist of that moment and really understanding the era that we're in propelled me to be very conscious in what was happening and made sure that I could be able to someday in the future tell the story of a young child born in the hood, raised by a bus driver and a teacher who dared to dream, who had audacious goals. And in 1994 presented me with that platform as a 20-year-old to be able to live in that moment. Yeah. I mean, the intoxicating effect of freedom. There was just a sense of optimism in our nation. And my book, I wanted to reignite that sense of optimism, the sense of hope. That we as a people really espouse. And I think we've lost that somewhat in the times that we're living in, with the challenges that we're facing. So even the timing of releasing it in 2019 was with a full understanding that 25 years later into our democracy, this is what hope looks like.
Interestingly enough, you also tell us a bit more than you have before about the nature of the relationship that you enjoyed with Mandela and the extent to which that relationship stayed even until his passing. So speak to us also about the extent to which that 1994 moment in some way carved you into South Africa's history, being so connected to Mandela too.
I think my winning in 1994, I represented a face of hope, a face of possibilities of what a black girl child can achieve. And of course, having the privilege to meet Mandela and to walk with Mandela and indeed to be mentored by him when he was the president, because I won in September and we became a new nation, the Rainbow Nation, with him leading us in April. And so, and him to embrace me was quite intentional, I think, on his part, in that here was this 20-year-old who could be the face of new South Africa, of what our children can become. And that relationship has shaped the woman that I am today. To sit in the council of one of the wisest men, you can only come out of that environment a better person. And indeed, he's taught me so many lessons about servant leadership, about selflessness. And to glean from that, well of wisdom has really, really defined the essence of the woman that sits in front of you.
I want to talk a little bit about then this interesting bit, at least I found in the book, between you, Madiba, and your role in politics. Yeah. Because there is a point where he offers you an opportunity to say, go and study overseas because you're interested in politics and in changing the country. Did you, at that time, or do you think Madiba saw you potentially as being a key political player in post-democratic South Africa?
I think Madiba always had a sense of hope about what young people can contribute to this nation. And what happened when I won Miss SA, after my reign, he offered me a scholarship to go and study at Georgetown University in DC, where Clinton studied. It's a good political university. And I also was a very politically conscious student at the University of Venda, involved in student politics. And so I think Udada understood that if I give this child an opportunity to go to school and have an education, perhaps she can be able to have a greater impact in our country in the future. And that's why I went back to school. I did my political degree at UNISA, and I spent some time studying at Harvard and at Yale to really, equip myself with knowledge, because knowledge is power, and our country needs a new generation of leaders who are going to take us to the next 25 years decisively, and knowing that we can continue to become and be a beacon of hope, not only to the continent, but the world over.
One of the things you also do is that you take us into the personal goings-on of your life. Yeah. I want to talk about the details that you tell us, especially around being in an abusive relationship at a time where you are in the middle of the spotlight in South Africa. You're the talk of town, and behind bars, you're having to suffer at the hands of this man who is your first real boyfriend. Yeah. And you take that into the conversation that we're having in South Africa today, and the extent to which women's bodies continue to be violated. And many people ask the question, well, how does Basetsana Kumalo stay in an abusive relationship as Miss South Africa?
Why it was important for me to tell my story with absolute honesty was I wanted to give gender-based violence a face that it also looks like Basetsana. Gender-based violence knows no class, no race, no socio-economic status. It happens across our country, and we know right now, Kathy, our country is at war with its women. We live in a country where every 3 hours a woman is murdered. We live in a country where just the average GB violence rate is higher than the global rate, global average. And so it is very disheartening. And I had to tell my story because understanding the hour of where we live in, and that women should speak out, should speak up. There's a lot of shame around being abused. Because you think, who's going to believe my story? Who is going to accept my truth? And therefore, you hide and you live a lie. And I did that for the longest time, stayed in the abusive relationship. And the importance of women being economically empowered, I cannot emphasize that more, because then when we make better choices for our bodies, for ourselves, for our children, and for our futures. And so I had to take my voice back and, first of all, walk away with my life. And I speak to a lot of women at events, who come up to me to say, how do I leave? When at times the justice system does not even protect me. I go to a police station and I'm faced with 10 men who have to take my case, open my docket, and then it gets lost in the system. And so for me, I wanted to make it very equivocally clear that this is not an hour, an era, a country that we are. We are better than that. Yeah. We are better than that. With those people who sinobuntu. Now that we wake up to a South Africa where Ubuntu is gone, where women are raped, where children, 6-year-olds are raped. And thank goodness he got a life sentence. It cannot be that us who have a voice keep quiet and we shield our stories and we sweep them under the carpet and say, well, I can't go there because what will people say? Well, that's what I thought initially, but my voice can save a life. And hence, I spoke very openly about that chapter of my life.
Sure. I found it also quite interesting that you speak at length about your relationship with your husband, Romeo Kumalo. There are lots of pictures that detail the journey that you've been on as a family. You also deliberately addressed the allegations that had made headlines towards sometime last year, if I'm not mistaken. Why did you feel the need to go there?
The need for me was very clear that I'm a mother who's raising children in my household. I am a mother to many children in this nation. I call myself hashtag mother of the tribe, not only because of my nuclear family, my 3 biological children, but a generation of young leaders I'm trying to raise in this nation. And to wake up one morning and somebody has decided to take to the Twitter streets with a keyboard and sit on that Twitter mountain and insult my family, insult my husband, insult me. And then, of course, that's insulting my children. And the legacy of my children, the legacy of my parents, the legacy of the Madibas who believed in me. And was their belief in me unfounded? When you can come on a given day and say, okay, I'll tweet this and I'll delete it. The damage is done, and my kids had to wake up the next day, go to school carrying this diabolical vitriol on their heads. It's unacceptable. And therefore, people often also misconstrue that public figures don't have constitutional rights. And therefore, I will exercise my constitutional rights and through the book of the law. My right to privacy, my integrity, it's enshrined. And that's the only recourse any of us have. And so I always take the legal system to fight the battles that only it can. The issue with the stalker, I speak about that. The issue with this corporate company that took advantage of my brand equity. And, you know, to read in the court transcripts, I just saw a black woman walking in and I didn't know who she was. But then you're going to use my face to advertise bicycles. So, you know, I don't take on every battle. I've got a lot on my plate. I'm raising children. I've got businesses to run. But then, you know, when it's about a legacy, about hard work, about your integrity, that's all we trade on, our good names.
All right, I'm going to then continue our conversation very briefly after the short break with Basetsana Kumalo. Her latest memoir, as you heard it, already a bestseller, is what we're in conversation about. So do stay with us. We'll continue after this break.